Hello to all my writer friends in Romania. I'd like to say a few words about my book, The Anatomy of Story, with a beautiful Romanian translation, which you see right here. When I first started writing stories, there were no books I could find about how to do that, which meant I had to be self-taught. So I saw as many great films as I could, often 2 a day, and I broke them all down to see what works and what doesn't. I found that about 90% of what works came from the deep story structure under the surface. This led me to create a theory of story that was based on the organic development of the hero as they move through the plot. I then translated that theory into specific practical techniques. I began writing and helping other writers fix their work. This led to a number of story consulting jobs. And I started to get a reputation for being really good at story. As you probably know, Hollywood is a small town, so my reputation got around fast. Based on the techniques I was using, I decided to teach a course called The Anatomy of Story, which is also the name of this book. Over 50,000 writers worldwide have now taken my story courses, including screenwriters, TV writers, and novelists. And those students have sold over $20 billion of books, films, and television. My book, The Anatomy of Story, has sold over 200,000 copies in 9 different languages. And now I'm happy to say, in the 10th language, Romanian. A lot of times when I talk to writers about what I do, they say, "Oh, I know all about story." They say, "I use 3-act structure, or hero's journey, or save the cat." And they think, that's all I need. Well, here's the problem. Those books are fine for beginners, but they have very few practical story techniques and almost nothing that can tell you how to write at the professional level. Bottom line, there is simply no way you can write professionally using those simple methods. To be a working professional in film or television, we're talking about being in the top 1% of writers in the world. And when I wrote The Anatomy of Story, my goal was to include all the professional story techniques a writer would need in order to write a hit screenplay or best-selling novel. I believe one of the biggest questions a writer needs to answer is, what's the main reason writers fail to get to the top? And in my opinion, it's because they don't know the story techniques that professional writers use. They think they know these techniques from reading the books I just talked about, but they're not professional techniques, and there's not enough of them. In my experience, the biggest difference between the top 1% of professional writers and everyone else is the ability to create complex plot. And what separates the top 0.1% of professional writers from everyone else is the ability to express advanced theme through complex plot. Another question I've been asked is, how do I teach this theory in my writer's studio, and how do I combine theory with practice? I have an ongoing writer's workshop and writer's room where I work with some excellent writers who are writing films, TV shows, and novels. We apply each chapter in the book in order to the story they're writing. That's because The Anatomy of Story is organized so that you can write a script from the ground up organically. Each writer takes their story from original premise through character construction, plot, theme, story world, and finally scenes and dialogue. We apply the same exercises that are at the end of each chapter in the book. I give them feedback, and they make fixes. This way, the story builds on a strong foundation. so we have to make far fewer corrections in the rewrite at the end of the process. I always say, let the process do the heavy lifting. And I can tell you that this approach works extremely well. As to advice for both students and teachers, for students, out of literally thousands of things I could say, I would pick two. First, always write something that may change your life. Second, make sure that your story hits the 7 major structure steps that are found in every good story. If you have those 7 steps, the story will work. If you don't, it will fail. For teachers, I would say spend most of your time helping your writers come up with a unique, complex plot. It's the hardest thing to teach. It's also the hardest thing for writers to learn. But it's by far the part of the craft that separates the top 1% of professional writers from everyone else. I hope you find the anatomy of story helpful. Remember, always let the process do the heavy lifting. Work the process, and you'll be amazed at the brilliant work you create. Thank you.